A girl's shaky step echoed through Piedmont Park, her walker trembling under the weight of a miracle. Sophie, 6, once bound to a wheelchair, moved because a boy believed she could. Eli, 9, with taped-up shoes and a tattered notebook, defied a world that called him a nobody. How does a homeless kid outshine doctors? Why did a father trust him? This tale of courage and connection will grip you, proving that hope can rise from the ashes of injustice. It was a bitter morning in Atlanta, the kind that made your breath cloud and your fingers ache. Outside the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, families hurried through the glass doors, their faces tight with worry, clutching coats and coffee cups. Amid the rush, one figure stood still. A small boy perched on a flattened cardboard box near the entrance, his head bent over a tattered notebook. Elijah Eli Thompson, just 9 years old, wore a faded jacket too big for his frame, sleeves rolled up, and a pair of sneakers held together by duct tape. A worn baseball hat sat low on his head, barely covering his ears. He didn't beg or speak, just sketched quietly, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with a quiet intensity. Eli had been coming to the hospital grounds for weeks, always in the same spot, always alone. Most people assumed he had a family member inside, a sibling, maybe a parent. The staff had tried to shoo him away at first, but Eli never caused trouble. He'd flash a shy smile if spoken to, then return to his notebook drawing stick figures and scribbled shapes. No one asked too many questions in a place like this, where grief and hope collided daily. Across the street, a sleek black SUV idled by a curb. Inside sat David Miller, a man in his late 40s, his tie loosened and his face lined with exhaustion. His tailored coat and polished watch screamed money, but his eyes told a different story, one of a man running on fumes. In the back seat, strapped into a booster seat, was his 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, her brown curls tucked under a knit blanket. Her wide eyes stared out the window, unblinking, silent. A car accident had stolen her ability to walk, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. Once a whirlwind of giggles and backyard races, Sophie now rarely spoke, her world shrinking to hospital rooms and whispered doctor consultations. David stepped out, opened the back door, and lifted Sophie into his arms, careful not to jostle her. He didn't notice Eli at first. Most people didn't. But as he approached the hospital doors, a small voice cut through the morning chill. "Sir, I can help your daughter walk again." David froze, his arms tightening around Sophie. The words weren't loud or pushy, just clear, steady, like a fact spoken by someone who believed it completely. He turned to see Eli standing, notebook tucked under his arm, his duct-taped sneakers scuffing the pavement. "What did you say?" David's voice was sharp, more curious than angry. Eli didn't flinch. "I said I can help her walk again." His tone held no trace of doubt, just a quiet certainty that seemed too big for a kid his age. David's eyes narrowed, taking in Eli's worn clothes, the cracked glasses dangling from his collar. "That's not funny, kid." His voice hardened, protective. "Skill. I'm not joking," Eli said, stepping closer. His eyes met David's, unflinching, as if he'd faced skepticism before and learned to stand his ground. David shook his head, turning toward the doors. "You don't know us," but as he walked inside, Eli's words clung to him, stubborn and unshakable. There was something in the boy's voice, not hope or desperation, but a conviction that made David's chest tighten. Inside the hospital, David sat through Sophie's appointment, nodding at the usual litany of medical terms: long-term recovery, manage expectations, incremental progress. But his mind kept drifting to the boy outside. He glanced at Sophie, her small hands folded in her lap, her face turned toward the window. She hadn't spoken all morning, but her eyes seemed brighter, like she'd heard something worth holding on to. As they left, David spotted Eli again, still on his cardboard, still sketching. A security guard approached, his voice gruff. "Move along, kid. You can't keep loitering here. I'll call social services next time." Eli's shoulders slumped, but he didn't argue, just packed his notebook and stood. The guard's words stung David, stirring a mix of guilt and anger. A kid like that, alone, dismissed like he was nothing, it wasn't right. David hesitated, then walked over, Sophie still in his arms. "You again," he said, his tone softer now. "Why'd you say that about my daughter?" Eli looked up, his face serious. "Because I can help. My mom taught me how. She used to make people move again." David studied him, torn between disbelief and curiosity. "Fine," he said finally. "Meet us at Piedmont Park this weekend, noon. Don't waste our time." Ellie nodded, his eyes steady. "I'll be there." David turned away, Sophie's weight light in his arms. As he buckled her into the car, she whispered, "He sounded like he meant it." David didn't reply, but for the first time in months, something stirred inside him. A flicker of something dangerous, like hope. Piedmont Park stretched out under a gray sky, its old oak trees casting long shadows over cracked paths and a rusty playground. Eli Thompson was already there, sitting on a worn bench near a towering sycamore, his duct-tape sneakers tucked under him. His small canvas bag rested at his feet, filled with simple tools: a folded towel, a tennis ball, a jar of cocoa butter, and a plastic container of rice he'd warmed earlier at a shelter kitchen. The 9-year-old's hands fidgeted with his notebook, but his eyes were steady, scanning the park for David and Sophie Miller. He'd promised to show up, and Eli never broke a promise. Not since his mom taught him that trust was all some people had. David's SUV pulled up just past noon, its engine humming softly before cutting off. He stepped out, his face still etched with doubt, and carefully lifted Sophie from the back seat, settling her into her wheelchair. Her brown curls bounced as she craned her neck, spotting Eli immediately. A small smile flickered on her face, the first David had seen in days. He wheeled her over, his steps heavy, like a man bracing for disappointment. "You're here," David said, his voice flat but not unkind. Eli stood, brushing off his oversized jacket. "Said I would be." He knelt beside Sophie, his eyes softening. "Hi, Sophie. Ready to try something?" Sophie nodded, her fingers clutching the blanket over her legs. "Will it hurt?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nope," Eli said, shaking his head. "Just warm and easy. If it feels weird, you say stop, okay?" Sophie's smile grew, and David's chest tightened. Watching his daughter respond to this strange boy with more trust than she'd shown her doctors. Eli opened his bag, placing the warm rice pack across Sophie's thighs. She flinched slightly, then relaxed as the heat seeped in. "Feels nice," she murmured. Eli began moving her legs, gently, small rotations, no force, just steady motion. He talked as he worked, asking about her favorite animal, dogs, and what she'd name one, Buddy. Sophie giggled, her answers short but brighter each time. David stood back, arms crossed, his skepticism battling the flicker of hope Sophie's laughter stirred. "Where'd you learn this?" he asked, his tone sharper than he meant. Eli didn't look up. "My mom. She was a physical therapist, worked with folks who couldn't afford fancy clinics. She'd take me to shelters after school, show me how to help." His voice softened. "She got sick a while back. Couldn't get the care she needed. Nobody listened when we asked for help." He paused, his hand still on Sophie's ankle. "She taught me the body remembers how to move, even when it's been quiet for a long time." David's jaw tightened. The injustice in Eli's words hit hard. A kid and his mom, dismissed by a system that favored those with money. He thought of his own endless hospital bills, paid without blinking, while Eli's mom had been left to fade. "So you think you're her now, a therapist?" David's voice was gruff, but curiosity seeped through. Eli shook his head. "I'm just me, but I listened when she taught me. That's enough to start." He tapped Sophie's knee lightly. "Feel anything?" "A little tingle," Sophie said, her eyes wide, "like pins." Eli grinned. "That's good. Means your legs are waking up." David's breath caught. Sophie had mentioned tingles before, but only in sterile hospital rooms, surrounded by machines that made her shrink. Here, under open sky, she seemed different, looser, braver. He wanted to dismiss it, to call it coincidence, but the way Sophie looked at Eli, like he was a friend, not a stranger, made him pause. As they worked, a jogger slowed, staring at the scene. A woman pushing a stroller whispered to her friend, pointing at Eli's taped-up shoes. David caught their glances, their judgment, and felt a surge of protectiveness he hadn't expected. "People stare," he muttered. Eli shrugged, unfazed. "They always do. Doesn't change what I'm here for." When the hour ended, Sophie's cheeks were flushed, her voice livelier. "Can we come back?" she asked, looking at her dad. David hesitated, glancing at Eli, who was packing his bag with care. The boy's story about his mom lingered, heavy with loss and unfairness. "We'll see," David said, but his tone was softer now. "Same time, same place?" Eli nodded. "I'll be here." As David wheeled Sophie back to the SUV, she reached for his hand. "He's nice, Daddy. He makes me feel strong." David didn't reply, but as he buckled her in, he caught Eli's small figure in the rearview mirror, standing alone under the sycamore. For the first time, David wondered if this kid, with nothing but a bag of rice and a broken heart, might be the one to change everything. The sun filtered through the sycamore at Piedmont Park, casting dappled light on the worn bench where Eli Thompson sat, his canvas bag open beside him. The 9-year-old adjusted his duct-taped sneakers, his fingers brushing the edge of his tattered notebook. For weeks, he'd met David and Sophie Miller here, guiding Sophie through gentle exercises with the same warmth his mother once used. Sophie's small victories, a wiggle of her toes, a faint pressure in her ankle, kept Eli going, but today his eyes flickered with unease, scanning the park for more than just his friends. David's SUV rolled up and he lifted Sophie from the back seat, her wheelchair creaking softly as he set her down. Sophie's face lit up when she saw Eli, her brown curls bouncing as she waved. "Eli, I practiced wiggling my toes last night." Her voice was bright, a stark contrast to the sterile hospital rooms she knew too well. Eli knelt beside her, his smile genuine but strained. "That's awesome, Sophie. Let's see what else you can do." He placed the warm rice pack on her legs, his hands steady as he guided her through rotations. David watched, his arms less tightly crossed than before, his skepticism softening with each of Sophie's giggles. But his gaze kept drifting to Eli, noticing the boy's tense shoulders, the way he glanced over his shoulder. "You okay, kid?" David asked, his voice low. Eli hesitated, then nodded. "Just, people sometimes make things hard." He didn't elaborate, but the weight in his voice hinted at more than park joggers' stares. David frowned, sensing something unspoken. As Eli worked with Sophie, asking about her favorite dog breeds to keep her relaxed, a woman in a stiff blazer approached, her badge glinting. "Elijah Thompson?" Her tone was clipped, official. Eli froze, his hand still on Sophie's ankle. David stepped forward, protective. "Who's asking?" "I'm Ms. Carter, Social Services," she said, eyes narrowing at Eli's worn clothes. "We've had reports of a minor loitering, possibly exploiting vulnerable families. I need to speak with the boy." David's jaw tightened. "Exploiting? He's helping my daughter. Look at her. She's smiling." Sophie, sensing the tension, clutched her blanket, her eyes darting between Eli and the woman. Ms. Carter's lips pursed. "He's an unaccompanied minor, no legal guardian. We can't have him running around playing therapist. It's not safe." Her words dripped with disdain, as if Eli's poverty made him a threat. Eli's face paled, his fingers gripping his notebook like a lifeline. "I'm not hurting anyone," he whispered. "I'm just trying to help." David's voice rose. "He's not playing. Sophie's moving her toes because of him, not your system that let kids like him slip through the cracks." He thought of Eli's mother, denied care, and the injustice burned. "Leave him alone." Ms. Carter scribbled on her clipboard. "I'll be back with an officer if needed. This isn't over." She walked away, leaving a heavy silence. Sophie reached for Eli's hand, her small fingers squeezing his. "Don't go," she said, her voice trembling. Eli swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. I won't. Not yet. He forced a smile, returning to Sophie's exercises, but his hands shook slightly. David watched, his heart twisting. He'd seen the world dismiss people like Eli before, kids with nothing but grit, judged for their circumstances. He knelt beside Sophie, joining Eli in massaging her calves, mimicking the boy's gentle motions. Why do they treat you like that? David asked quietly, his anger simmering. Edie's voice was soft, almost lost in the breeze. After Mom died, I stayed in a shelter. They took my stuff once, said I didn't belong. This notebook's all I got left of her. They don't see me. They just see a problem. His words cracked, revealing a wound deeper than David had realized. Sophie looked up, her eyes wide. You're not a problem. You're my friend. She squeezed his hand again, and Eli blinked back tears, his smile small but real. Thanks, Sophie. David's throat tightened. He saw his daughter's trust in Eli, her laughter, her spark returning. He saw Eli's fear, the weight of a world that didn't care. You're not alone anymore, David said, his voice firm. We're coming back next week, and I'll deal with that social worker. Eli nodded, his eyes meeting David's with a flicker of hope. As they packed up, Sophie whispered to Eli, You make me brave. Eli's lips trembled, and he turned away, hiding a tear. David watched them, feeling something shift inside, a wall crumpling, replaced by a fragile, dangerous thing. Belief in a boy who refused to give up. Piedmont Park hummed with a quiet energy, the sycamore's shade softer today as Eli Thompson unpacked his canvas bag on the familiar bench. The 9-year-old's duct-taped sneakers scuffed the grass, but his hands moved with purpose, laying out his towel, rice pack, and tennis ball. Sophie Miller's laughter from their last session lingered in his mind, a shield against the social worker's threat that still hung over him. Eli glanced at his notebook, its pages filled with his mother's sketches and lessons, and felt her strength steadying him. He wasn't alone anymore, not with Sophie and David by his side. David's SUV pulled up, and Sophie's face lit up as he wheeled her over, her blanket tucked snugly around her. Eli, she called, waving a drawing of a dog labeled Buddy. I made this for you. Eli's eyes widened, his fingers tracing the crayon lines. This is awesome, Sophie, he said, his voice catching. No one had given him something so personal since his mom passed. He tucked the drawing into his notebook next to her lessons and knelt to start their routine. As Eli guided Sophie through stretches, her toes twitching more confidently now, David joined in, massaging her calves as Eli had shown him. The park felt different today, less empty. A nurse from the hospital walking her dog paused to watch, whispering to a friend. Word of Eli's work had spread, carried by hospital staff who'd seen Sophie's progress. Soon a family approached. A boy in a walker, his mother hesitant but hopeful. We heard you helped a girl move her legs, she said. Can you try with my son? Eli looked at David, who nodded. Go for it, kid. Eli knelt beside the boy, Caleb, explaining the rice pack's warmth and gentle ankle rotations. Caleb's mother watched, her eyes glistening as her son's foot shifted slightly. A small win. You're not broken, Eli told Caleb softly. Your body's just finding its way. Caleb smiled, shy but real, and his mother hugged Eli, her tears soaking his jacket. Eli froze, the embrace pulling up memories of his mom's arms. He blinked hard, hiding his face. David watched, his chest tight. He'd seen Sophie's spark return, and now this boy, Caleb, was smiling too, but not everyone saw Eli's light. A man nearby muttered, "A homeless kid playing doctor? That's trouble waiting to happen." David's fists clenched, the sting of injustice sharp. He'd faced skepticism in boardrooms, but this was different. Eli was a child, judged for his taped-up shoes and lack of a home, not his heart. David pulled out his phone, posting a short message online. "A boy with nothing is giving my daughter hope. Don't judge what you don't understand." The post spread quickly, shared by hospital staff and parents. By the next hour, another family arrived, a girl recovering from a stroke, her father carrying a folding chair. Eli worked with her too, showing her parents how to use the towel for stretches, his voice steady despite the growing crowd. The park transformed. A woman brought water bottles saying, "For the kids." A dad set up a picnic blanket sharing snacks. Strangers became neighbors, united by Eli's quiet determination, but not all were kind. A local blogger, overhearing the chatter, approached with a notebook. "This the kid?" he asked David, eyeing Eli. "Got a story here. What's his deal?" David hesitated, glancing at Eli, who was helping Caleb's mom adjust the rice pack. "He's just helping," David said. "Doesn't want attention." Eli overheard and shook his head. "It's not about me," he said softly. "It's about them." The blogger nodded, scribbling, but promised to keep Eli's name out of it. As the session ended, Sophie grabbed Eli's hand. "You're like a superhero," she said, her eyes shining. Eli laughed, a rare sound. "Nah, I'm just Eli." But David saw the truth. This boy who'd lost everything was building something bigger than himself. He thought of Eli's mom, denied care, and the system that saw her son as a problem. It wasn't right. Packing up, David handed Eli a granola bar. "You're doing good, kid," he said, his voice thick. Eli tucked it into his bag, his eyes meeting David's. "Thanks for sticking up for me." David nodded, feeling a shift. A father's instinct to protect, not just Sophie but this boy too. As they left, Sophie waved her drawing in the air, and Eli clutched his notebook tighter, its pages now holding a dog named Buddy, and a promise to keep showing up, no matter what the world thought of him. The air at Piedmont Park felt heavier today, the sycamore's branches swaying as Eli Thompson set up his towel on the worn bench. His canvas bag spilled open, revealing the familiar tools: rice pack, tennis ball, cocoa butter jar. But his hands trembled slightly, the social worker's threat from weeks ago still a shadow over him. The 9-year-old tucked Sophie's drawing of Buddy the dog into his notebook, its crayon lines a reminder of why he kept coming back. Sophie Miller's progress, her toes now curling with purpose, fueled Eli's resolve. But the fear of being taken away gnawed at him. David's SUV pulled up, and Sophie's grin shone as he wheeled her over. "Eli, I felt my knee move last night," she said, her voice bright with hope. Eli's eyes lit up, masking his worry. "That's huge, Sophie," he said, kneeling to start their routine. David watched, his posture softer now, his hands joining Eli's to guide Sophie's legs. Her laughter filled the air, a sound that once seemed impossible, but David's gaze kept drifting to Eli, noticing the boy's quick glances toward the park entrance. As Eli worked, a small crowd gathered, families who'd heard of his gift. Caleb, the boy with the walker, shuffled closer, his mother beaming as he stood longer each time. The park buzzed with quiet encouragement, but tension broke through when Ms. Carter, the social worker, returned, this time with a police officer. "Elijah Thompson," she called, her voice cutting through the chatter. "We need to discuss your situation. No guardian, no address. This can't continue." Eli froze, his hands on Sophie's ankle. David stepped forward, his voice firm. "He's helping these kids. You've got no right to harass him." Sophie clutched Eli's sleeve, her eyes wide. "Don't take him," she whispered, her voice breaking. Miss Carter's eyes narrowed. "He's a minor, unsupervised, living on the streets. We're protecting him and these families." Her words stung, framing Eli's kindness as a risk. The officer shifted uncomfortably, but his presence loomed. Eli's face paled, his notebook clutched like a shield. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said, his voice small but steady. David's anger flared. "You call this wrong? Look at my daughter. She's moving because of him, not your system that failed his mom." He thought of Eli's mother, denied care, and the injustice burned hotter. "I'm working on guardianship papers. He's not alone anymore." The crowd murmured, some parents nodding, others stepping closer to Eli. Caleb's mom spoke up. "This boy gave my son hope. You can't take that away." Miss Carter hesitated, but her clipboard stayed firm. "We'll follow up," she said, leaving with the officer, their footsteps heavy on the path. Eli exhaled, his shoulders slumping. Sophie reached for his hand. "You're not going anywhere, right?" Eli forced a smile, but his eyes glistened. Not if I can help it. He returned to her exercises, guiding her to press her heel down. Feel that? He asked. Sophie's brow furrowed, then her eyes widened. It's stronger. She pushed harder and her knee lifted. An inch, then 2. David gasped, dropping to his knees. Sophie, you did that? Tears welled as she nodded, her grin wide. Eli's voice cracked. You're doing it, Sophie. The crowd cheered softly, but Eli stepped back, his gaze distant. David followed him to the bench. What's wrong, kid? Eli's voice was barely a whisper. This park? It's where I feel Mom. If they take me, I lose her all over again. His fingers traced the notebook's edge, its pages holding her lessons, her love. David's throat tightened. He saw Sophie's joy, Eli's fear, and the unfairness of a world that judged a boy for his circumstances. You're not losing her, he said, or us. He paused, then added, Come stay with us. We've got a guest room. Sophie needs you, and so do I. Eli's eyes widened. You mean it? David nodded, his voice firm. You're family now. Sophie wheeled over, her face bright. Eli, please say yes. Eli looked at her drawing in his notebook, then at Sophie's hopeful eyes. Okay, he whispered, a tear falling. As they packed up, Sophie handed Eli a small box. Inside was a pair of new sneakers, her savings spent on them. No more tape, she said, smiling. Eli hugged the shoes, his voice breaking. Thanks, Sophie. David watched, his heart full. Knowing this boy had given them more than movement, he'd given them a reason to believe again. Ellie Thompson stood in the doorway of the Miller home, his canvas bag slung over one shoulder, the new sneakers Sophie had given him gleaming on his feet. The 9-year-old clutched his mother's tattered notebook, its pages now holding Sophie's drawing of Buddy the dog, alongside lessons of healing. The guest room David offered was simple, a soft bed, clean sheets, a small desk, but to Eli it was a world away from shelters and park benches. As he stepped inside, Sophie wheeled up, her grin wide. Welcome home, Eli, she said, her voice bright. David, holding a coffee mug, nodded. Right on time, kid. Eli's chest tightened, a mix of warmth and disbelief. For the first time since his mom passed, he wasn't alone. At Piedmont Park, the sycamore still shaded their weekly sessions, but the bench now felt like a gathering place. Sophie's progress was steady but incomplete. She could stand with a walker, her legs trembling but stronger, her knees lifting higher each time. Eli guided her with the same rice pack and tennis ball, his voice gentle. Push a little, Sophie. Your body's listening. She grunted, her brow furrowed, and managed a shaky step leaning on the walker. David knelt beside her, his eyes shining. You're incredible, kiddo. Sophie beamed, but her gaze flicked to Eli. You taught me how. Ellie's new routine included school, a change David insisted on. At the kitchen table, Eli pored over books, his pencil tracing math problems. But his mother's notebook remained his guide. One evening, he showed David a new page, sketches of stretches, notes on pressure points, titled Mom's Lessons. I want to be like her, Eli said softly. Help people move again. David nodded, his throat tight. We'll get you there. The park sessions grew, families returned, bringing chairs and snacks, turning the grass into a community hub. Caleb, the boy with the walker, stood longer now, his laughter mingling with others. But not all saw the good. Whispers of Eli's past, homeless, uneducated, surfaced in online comments after David's post went viral. A kid like that shouldn't be trusted, one read. The words stung, reminding David of the social worker's clipboard, the system that failed Eli's mom. He couldn't let it win again. David acted. Using his business connections, he launched a fund in Eli's mother's name, Lila's Legacy, to provide free physical therapy for families in need. No one should be left behind like she was, he told Eli, who stared, wide-eyed. You're naming it after Mom? David nodded. She started this through you. Eli hugged his notebook, tears falling. She'd like that. At the park, Eli became Sophie's other kids as they tried stretches. One girl, recovering from a stroke, gripped Sophie's hand, mimicking her effort. "You're not broken," Sophie told her, echoing Eli's words. The girl smiled, and Eli watched, his heart full. The park wasn't just his mom's place anymore. It was theirs, a space where kids like Sophie and Caleb found strength, where parents shared hope. One afternoon, under the sycamore, Eli and Sophie sat on the grass, sketching in his notebook. Sophie drew a tree, its branches wide. "It's us," she said, pointing to the roots. "You, me, Dad, family." Eli added a stick figure with new sneakers, his hand shaking. "I never had a family like this," he whispered. Sophie leaned against him. "You do now." David watched from the bench, his phone buzzing with fund updates, therapists volunteering, donations growing. He thought of Sophie's first step, Eli's trembling hands holding her gift, the crowd's cheers. The world hadn't been fair to Eli, judging his taped-up shoes, his lack of a home. But here, in this park, Eli had built something bigger than prejudice. A place where broken bodies and hearts began to heal. That night, as David tucked Sophie in, she clutched her walker. "Eli's my best friend," she said. "He makes me believe I can do anything." David kissed her forehead, then checked on Eli, who was asleep at his desk, notebook open to a new page, Lila's Lessons, Part 2. David smiled, his own heart lighter. Eli hadn't just given Sophie steps, he'd given them a purpose. The park sessions continued, quieter now but steady. Eli, no longer a boy on a cardboard box, stood taller, his sneakers a gift, his home a promise. He wasn't a hero, just Eli, a kid who showed up again and again, proving that love, grit, and a mother's lessons could outshine any injustice. Under the sycamore, with Sophie by his side, Eli knew his mom was watching, her legacy alive in every step they took together. Eli and Sophie's story shows us that hope can bloom in the toughest places, often from those society overlooks. I believe kindness and grit like Eli's can outshine any system that fails the vulnerable. It's a reminder that kids, even those judged for their circumstances, can change lives with heart and persistence. But maybe you see it differently. Perhaps you think change needs credentials or structure, not just a child's faith. That's okay. It's worth debating what makes a hero. For me, Eli's story screams that we all have a role in lifting others up, no matter how small our tools. What do you think? Can one kid spark a movement, or is it too big a dream? Thank you for joining me in this story. Please share your thoughts below, follow for more stories that inspire, and let's keep this conversation going. Your voice matters.